Hey, and welcome back to the Up and Coming Artist Podcast. I'm Christian, a photographer.
And I'm Ben. I'm an animator. So Christian, how you doing?
I'm doing good. I got some projects in the works that I'm pretty excited about.
Oh yeah? Can you talk about them?
Well, I can mention that I recently got a job.
Oh.
Doing video work, which is exciting.
Nice.
I think it's important to share with people, that sometimes that first job isn't going to be a mind-blowing job, but it's good. It's a good job. It gets you that good experience to be able to help launch you into your career. So if there's anyone out there who's even doing anything in art at all, even if it's not their favorite, it really is very beneficial and something that you should be proud of and excited about.
No, you're absolutely right. And that transitions perfectly into my conversation, because you weren't there, with my good friend Jordan Haro. Everyone's taking jobs that they didn't think were exactly what they wanted, or maybe not exactly what they wanted to do, but it's those things that sometimes get us where we want to be.
I completely agree.
And so with that, have you ever thought about doing voice acting, Christian?
Honestly, yeah, but I wouldn't know where to start or what to expect. I mean, it's a whole world I know nothing about.
Welcome to the podcast, Christian. You're going to enjoy this. Jordan is a great guy, and he's done projects from Invader Zim to current Amazon shows that I don't even think have been announced yet. Really great stuff. So I know all of you are going to be super interested, or at least I was, if you've ever thought about doing voice acting, to hear Jordan's insights and what he has to say. Jordan and I recorded this in downtown Burbank, literally right in between Cartoon Network and Nickelodeon, which is a really cool place, but there are a lot of cars driving by and the audio is not good. So if any of you are looking into doing voice acting, don't record in downtown Burbank. But also, in this podcast, and you'll hear about it in a second, Christian, Jordan gives advice not only on acting, but also in the kinds of equipment and supplies that are helpful for people who are trying to get in, but also who are on a budget. And that's something, as we're starting this podcast, for us even to look into.
Well, I'm really excited.
And I hope you guys are too, to listen to my conversation with Jordan Haro. Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. It is just me, Ben, today, hanging out with my good friend and amazing voice actor, Jordan Haro.
Amazing.
Oh, yes. I should have said exquisite.
You flatter.
Yeah. How you doing, Jordan?
I'm doing fantastic. Thank you very much, man. And I'm very, very happy, to be doing this. This is great.
Dude, thank you for meeting with me. It's been too long.
It has been too long. My goodness. Since the animation festival, that we had, back at Sony Studios, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly.
My gosh, what a
I wanted
trip.
to start with that.
Absolutely, yeah.
We met because we were sitting right next to each other.
We were.
Pitching shows at Sony, which now thinking back is that sounds a lot cooler than I feel like I really thought about at the time.
Oh, absolutely,
you know what I
mean? Yeah. We definitely should have been counting our blessings, because, first and foremost, Sony Studios, holy crap, man. What an opportunity. Now, if memory serves me correctly, hopefully I'm remembering this correctly, but you're not a CSUN student, right?
No, I'm a Cal State Fullerton student.
Fullerton, that's right.
We're like brothers, or half siblings.
Half-siblings, or something like that, yeah.
Because you went to CSUN.
I went to CSUN, yes.
And were you still at CSUN back at that time?
I was, yes. I was finishing up my last semester, and I had kind of taken animation, the beginner's course of animation, because it had always fascinated me. Ever since I was a kid, actually, before I even knew, how cartoons were made and how voice acting was even a thing back in that time. And I had taken an acting course and an animation course, and I absolutely loved it. That was the most fun and most rewarding semester I've ever had at CSUN, in my whole journey of academia.
That's awesome.
And I met some really wonderful people. I had a teacher that was wonderful and insightful, and learned so much just about the history, history that I'm actually jazzed learning about. Not to give the film department any discredit or anything like that, but just there are certain aspects about any field that you study that you kind of when am I going to put this exactly and apply it to my career. But for animation, it was always a special place in my heart. Ever since I was a kid, being a millennial,
right? Yeah,
the stereotypical millennial that grew up on television and cartoons and hyped up '90s commercials. That was a very special semester for me, and I'm so glad I met you and met so many other thirsty students just wanting to use their talents to create something.
Yeah, no, that was awesome. And the show you were pitching was a show you developed with your friend off a comic, right? Or something like that?
The show in question was based off of a webcomic that still exists. It's called Bomango. I was a representative for Rob, the creator. He goes by Van Heist on social media, but his name's Rob Tempest. And brilliant artist, brilliant storyteller. And I remember reading his comics way back in like 2014, actually.
Oh, wow.
And I remember being enthralled by these characters and the story. It was just... And also a little bit of controversy as well, just with like the storytelling, and I'll get to that maybe like at a later time. But that was what I was pitching, because I was given his blessing in terms of like, yeah, sure, if someone bites, like we'll work out the finer details like later.
Right.
But he was adamant about basically if someone did, because the whole concept of selling a show is that basically you're being invited over for dinner. You're not in charge at all. Yeah. It's not like you're being invited over for dinner. Like, hey, can we have sirloin steaks for dinner and then like this and that? Like, well, we already prepared meatloaf, but like I don't think you understand.
That is a perfect metaphor.
Oh, absolutely, God. Yeah. And it's not even my own interpretation. There's a website like that gleaned a lot of intel from even before going into this pitch, and they have like tons of insightful information. I think it's Comic Book Heroes. I could be wrong about that. My memory's failing me at this point. But that was what I was pitching.
Well, and we will put a pin in and come back to Bomango, because that's a big one on your YouTube page.
Yes,
But I want to go back, because you started talking about you as the millennial, you growing up. So that's what got you into voice acting, right? Is watching cartoons.
Oh, yes, absolutely.
Any like specific things in particular that led you that direction?
Well, like a lot of millennials, I grew up, I wouldn't want to say the golden age of animation, but kind of, at least for me, definitely influential shows, and like kind of the top tier with Nickelodeon, Cartoon Network, and Disney.
Which, by the way, we're sitting like a block away from Nickelodeon at this moment.
Yeah, we
Cartoon Network. Yeah,
we had like a special seminar that we got to attend because my teacher worked at Nickelodeon Studios at the time.
Oh, that's awesome!
And we got a sneak peek into what they were doing, and they were going like, "Oh yeah, we're bringing back Rocko's Modern Life. We're bringing back Hey Arnold and stuff like that." And we're like, "Oh my god!"
Yeah,
silently fanboying as being given a tour of this amazing facility.
Yeah,
but yeah, I would have to say at least the top 10 shows that were influential in shaping me. And I'm gonna throw in a few animated features as well when I can. But definitely Rugrats, Hey Arnold, All Real Monsters, definitely SpongeBob, definitely Rocket Power, definitely a lot of other shows that not only that I watched, but my family watched as well.
Yeah.
And also, I'm a huge Disney fan. Disneyland is my home away from home, and it's like an unspoken language between me and my family, because we communicate in movie quotes.
Yeah.
And my brother and I got so good at it, we could just start one and then we'd be able to finish it.
Yeah.
And it's almost like we finish each other's sentences.
Yeah.
It's so adorable in that way. But the thing was that I became a snob at it, because I had watched it so often, the same shows, the same movies over and over and over again, like a broken cassette tape, that I became a bit of a snob. Whenever, either my brother or my sister or, even my mom and my dad would say, a quirky movie quote, I'd be like, no. It goes like this. I would say with the right inflection. If they left out, a few words, which would be totally forgivable.
Yeah.
I would be no, word for word, it goes like this. That was even before I even knew voice acting was a thing, because in my mind's eye, from a child's perspective, that was Pinky and from the Brain. That what was, Rocco from Rocco's Modern Life. They weren't anyone else. I was that immersed and that, captivated by their performances, these actors. And when I realized, voice acting is a thing? That's amazing!
Yeah.
Because when I first had any sort of notion of what I wanted to do with my life, it definitely was in the realms of entertainment, and acting was definitely something that was very near and dear to my heart. I had a heart for performing, and it was definitely something that I felt like I was good at, because not only was I good at imitating these characters that I grew up watching, but they meant something to me, and they weren't just silly voices, they were actual characters, and that's kind of what the core of voice acting is. It's not just anyone can do a silly voice. Anyone can do a silly voice, but it takes a degree to take that silly voice and make it into a believable character. And that's the whole magic of animation and voice acting working in harmony, and something that I wanted to be, desperately a part of. But my parents had a mixed bag of going like, oh okay, you want to be an actor, like that's good, wonderful, follow your dreams, but it's always good to have something like, that's more like, practical in that regard. Exactly. And I had many a conversation with my parents about like, where I wanted to take my career. Especially when I got towards the senior year in high school, where I was a part of choir, I was a part of theater, and also the swim team at one point, and those are very like, special memories for me. For your senior year, there was like a job shadow project that you had to do. I'm pretty sure what you're familiar with.
Yeah.
But for some reason or other, there wasn't a whole lot of actors that I knew that I felt like were successful. So I kind of like, as backup, I'm like, okay, maybe animation could be a thing for me.
Right.
Because like I love cartoons and I love like the process, and I love to doodle, and I even made stupid comics back when I was in high school, like of just pop culture things that me and my friends were playing, like video games and like movies that we grew up with. And so I tried like shadowing an animator who was going to Cal Arts, and she basically just took me through a tour of Cal Arts Studios and out of campus, and basically her day-to-day life of like what she does in terms of assignments. Now at the time, it took me like hours to do just one picture, and she was making like amazing just sketches like within seconds, 10 of them like within like 5 minutes. I'm going like, I think I might have made a mistake in choosing this field. It was there that like I delved further and further into the realms of academia, and also through kind of like the influence of my parents as well, where I'm like, okay, maybe acting is still something that I want to do. Right. And so I was going to a community college at the time, and I decided, okay, I still want to be an actor. And so I was going through the ringer of that, learning more about my field, learning more, honing my craft, learning more and more about it, loving it all the more. But as I kept meeting with my counselor, she basically gave me an outline of like, okay, if acting is still what you want to do, you want to pursue this school or this school, depending on like what your budget range is, depending on like if and when you get there. And then afterwards, like you'll want to do this like as an actor, depending on like if you'll probably take a side job. Basically, kind of like outlining like the starving artist they lay it out in front of you, because like people have gone before you and have like met with lucrative to no success as well. I'm like, okay, maybe I need to rethink this acting thing too. So the sad part was I was 2/3 through my requirement, and looking back, I'm going like, well, I don't regret it, because like if I would have gotten a theater degree, and if that would have imploded on me, there's not a whole lot you can do with a theater degree in the workforce. It's like, oh, you're an actor. There's not a whole lot available for you. So I instead switched to film production, hence me transferring to CSUN. And with CSUN though, I thought like going through like the ringer of like film production would be a wonderful thing. And give credit where credit is due. There were amazing things and wonderful things and things that I look back on fondly that I went through and that I learned going through the film production stage of academia. But when I look back at it even further, there were always blatant hints where like, okay, I think you would have been happier if you would have stuck with theater and doing acting. But still, though, coming back full circle, to acting and animation, it's exactly where I want to be. And so currently, right now, I just finished a recording session to get my commercial demo reel produced. Hopefully, one step after the other, I'll be able to submit to agencies. And who knows, 5 years from now, or maybe even 2 years from now, I'll either be in the same exact spot, or I'll have considerable work under my belt.
Yeah, that's awesome, man.
Because I have done some pretty significant things, that I'm very proud of. But at the same time, you're still thinking about that Disney audition, or you're still thinking about that. Either Warner Brothers or Blizzard or what have you, either a big gaming company or the next animated feature or something like that. Yeah. That's always in the back of your mind. Yeah.
And you've done a lot of projects, and I actually, you know what? Before I get onto that, just because you're just finishing up with talking about school, for those who don't know and are listening, what film production, what acting, what even voice acting is, could you even just dive into those just a little bit, talk about them, what you like and maybe don't like about each one?
Absolutely, yeah. It takes a lot to make a movie. There are so many things, and I know everyone is thinking, whenever a terrible movie comes out, or even if you just see the trailer, oh, that's going to be a garbage movie.
And we're sitting here in Burbank, so
exactly. Yeah. The birthing of a movie starts as basically a concept. Someone, thinks up this idea, or several people, and then they basically pitch it to film studios. And then that idea becomes a script, the script becomes a outline, and then the outline basically becomes a game plan where, okay, how do we make this a reality? Mm-hmm. And there are so many departments in what goes, in just the production phase of a movie. There are several phases. There's the pre-production, there's the production, and there's post-production. And after that is distribution, actually.
Right.
With movies, there's so many processes that require so many different departments. That's why when you look at like studios like either Warner Brothers or Universal, you see how they have these multiple sound stages, huge departments, and you're going like, wow, like what's all this for? Like,
Right.
there are so many departments. There's sound, there's camera, cinematography, there's talent, there's administration, and so many others. Just what's different between that and animated films is that it's pretty much the same bag, only instead of like with cameras, you're dealing with a huge production of animators, people who are like painstakingly recreating and drawing frame by frame in individual shots of your movie. Mm-hmm. Imagine a movie that you know by heart and taking each individual frame of that film, deleting it, and then by memory just try retracing that with a pencil like frame by frame, and that's essentially the amount of work that any animator is given. And that's just to be like on the general scope of scale. There's artists specifically that do background, there's artists specifically that do outlining for characters, there's artists specifically that deal with 3D elements and even lighting. My goodness, the list is just redonkulous.
Yeah.
And now that we're kind of in the realms of animation, on the talent side of things, as opposed to like if you were to have an actual actor in front of a camera, there are voice actors. It's kind of the same bag as as any acting, only with voice acting, you get to have the freedom to have a little more bolder of choices because there's not a camera in front of you. You don't have to worry about hitting your mark. You don't have to worry about how your face looks or continuity in like for makeup or hair or wardrobe for that matter. With voice acting, it's essentially making a believable performance that you can't see until the aid of animation. They go hand in hand. When it comes to animation, you're basically recreating everything on a sound scale from the ground up. That is accommodating the visual aspect of what you are interpreting. For those of you who have grown up, watching wonderful animated films, from Disney, from Don Bluth, from DreamWorks, from and even television is no stranger to how this process is done. It all ties together in terms of how much hard work it takes to make a good show or a good movie, because there are flops, there are bad shows, there are bad movies. What's easy to fall into the categories of I could do better than that. No, you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
You don't know how much hard work it goes into making a movie. This is why criticism and critique is just kind of a mixed bag, because anyone can look at The Room and say oh, that's a terrible movie, and just chastise it to no end. But if you can't basically take that terrible movie, and if given the opportunity you couldn't do better, you have no authority, or you don't know what you're talking about.
Right.
To bring things back to home, it takes so much hard work and dedication to make something like a movie or a TV show, whether animated or otherwise.
Yeah. And so then for you now, because you've done film production,
Mm-hmm.
you've done live acting, and
Yes.
you've done voice acting. So
Yes.
in terms of acting and voice acting, what are the differences in terms of your approach or how you act, or if there are any?
Well, I'll go ahead and delve into the film production, the film style of acting.
Sure.
Where if you're acting in front of a camera, there's a very specific setup. If we can just do it for a quick example here.
Yeah, sure.
If we do a scene like this, if we're sitting at a coffee shop and we're doing a scene between two individuals, say for example we're talking about oh dude, I just got fired from my job, man, and it's a very serious scene. The camera is going to be positioned in a way where it's going to encapsulate either Ben and myself, or solely myself, or solely Ben. And the thing with that is because there's focus and markers that you have to take into consideration. You have to be considerate of what you're doing with your hands, what you're doing with your body gesture, because it all comes down to continuity. Once everything is shot and recorded, it all gets transferred to the post-production room, or the cutting room, for short. And the continuity has to be there. For example, if I have a drink in my hand and I'm occasionally taking sips from it, there's someone on the production side of teams that keeps count of how many drinks I'm taking. And also the same can be said if we were, for example, walking down the street. There's going to be a certain finite amount of time between our dialogue that we're sharing before we either run out of basically room,
Yeah,
exactly, or when the camera is basically unable to record anymore. So there's definitely like rules and regulations and limitations that you'll be able to encounter when you're acting in front of a camera,
Right.
as opposed to voice acting. Now, voice acting, most of the time, you don't have the luxury of working with another actor.
Right.
Mostly it's just you by yourself in a soundproof room with a microphone in front of your mouth and in a script in front of you. And it's very impersonal sometimes because you're
Yeah.
given live feedback for the engineers and also the director behind the glass.
Right.
That's basically giving you direction. So, for example, if I'm trying to narrate a character and bring to life a character like in the same exact setup between that coffee room setup, I'm just simply recording my lines, and occasionally another individual will be basically reading Ben's lines, and I'll be able to react off of that. But most of the time, it's just me saying my lines in front of a microphone, and you'll hear the engineer go either, can we get one more? Can we get one more? And every so often, like, you actually get feedback, which is great. But what I love about it is that you're able to make choices and do things like with your body that you wouldn't be able to do in front of a camera.
Right.
So if you're like very boisterous and you're very like, exaggerated about something like that your character is proclaiming, you get to throw up your arms, which would be considered overacting if you're in front of
Right.
the camera, like, Eureka, this happened, or something like that, or like, oh, I just got fired from my job, or like, oh, this person irks me in like the worst way.
Yeah.
Where you basically look like an evil genius, like
Right,
like
clenching your hands.
Exactly. But the thing is that like what kind of gets befuddled between like how people interpret voice acting is that harking back to like, oh, people just making silly voices, like anyone can do that.
Right.
No, you're still acting, you're still making a believable character, you're still making a believable performance. Let's see, there's actually a great quote that my voice teacher actually, Christine Menzies, who I love and adore, she said, there's a difference between an actor and a liar. With the actor, there is an unspoken contract between the actor and the audience where what they are saying is taken as, oh, it's not real. And the difference between the liar is there is no unspoken contract. What they are saying is basically like, like either this person's either telling the truth or this person's lying. And it's part of acting like that makes a good performance believable. Right. Is that you can believe that this person is really going through a divorce. You can believe that this person is really suffering a great loss in their life. Or you can believe that this person is very jovial and excited and triumphant about something they just overcame in their life. Or they're very twisted and sinister,
Right.
very underhanded about something. That's the difference between just making a silly voice or doing an impression and making a believable character. But that's kind of the beauty of voice acting is sometimes, to quote Chuck Huber actually from Funimation, he for those of you who don't know, Chuck Huber is the voice of Android 17, Emperor Pilaf, and a whole bunch of other characters from Dragon Ball Z and many other shows that we've all grown up and loving. What Chuck Huber teaches is the fact that you can actually take a bad impression or an impression of a character that you can do really well and make it an original character. For those of you who grew up watching the show Pinky and the Brain, the actor who plays the Brain is a very talented gentleman by the name of Maurice LaMarche. And Brain, in his eyes, is just simply an Orson Welles impression. Yeah.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it.
Orson Welles is basically the writer and director of Citizen Kane. He talks like this every so often, and he's like, oh, my love, what has become of you? And then just translate that a little more and just give this mouse a huge head, like, hey, same thing we do every night, Pinky. Try to take over the world, kind of thing. And that is a terrible Brain impression. But he took that impression of Orson Welles and made it into an original character, a tiny little mouse with a Napoleon complex.
Yeah.
And it was, it's beautiful and it's amazing. You can even take a bad impression, like of a celebrity that you can do. For example, as an exercise, this is actually harking back to the point that I was originally going to make with Chuck Huber's class, is that for one of our assignments, we had to take an impression of either an actor or a character that we were just god-awful. and just basically and use it as an original character.
Oh, that's great.
I did a terrible Tom Hanks impression, and I basically, made it an original character, and I cannot do a Tom Hanks impression to save my life. And it was just so wonderful because like all of us did these horrible impressions, and we're going like, oh my gosh, that's a great voice. Who was it? And then as soon as they said it, it's like, oh my gosh,
that's terrible.
Exactly. I can never see that person like as like. Oh my gosh! And
that's amazing.
But like, if we can just talk about impressions for like just a quick second,
Yeah, do it.
That was almost my gateway drug into voice acting.
Right.
Because again, like it kind of harks back to me just quoting these characters that I grew up with, and then I realized, oh wow, voice acting's a thing. But also, I had to kind of myself go through that ringer of understanding that it's more than just a silly voice. It's more than just you simply being able to do an impression of Kermit the Frog or Miss Piggy or something like that. These really iconic, silly voices that a lot of people can do, actually, if you think about it. That's why I love voice acting so much, is because like I get to voice a character that would never be conceptually possible unless maybe like you were to like I guess make it a puppet or something like that, or maybe like a 3D effect. And that's why I love the beauty of both animation and voice acting, because it's a perfect merger of being able to create something that can never be conceived. That's why like I have such a soft spot for just cartoons in general. I'll never stop watching cartoons. I will never stop watching cartoons because there will always be that magic of just seeing these characters just come to life in the way they are. And there's actually a gentleman that I want to quote here. He goes by the name of hotdiggitydemon.com on YouTube. His name's Max G. I follow him. I highly recommend subscribing to him if you have the opportunity to. Because like there was one thing that he was bringing back to with the reboot of the Powerpuff Girls. And he was a huge Powerpuff Girls fan. But with the reboot like of the Powerpuff Girls, like they recast like Blossom, Bubbles, and Buttercup.
Right.
But
not Tom Kenny.
Exactly. Which was strange, to say the least.
Yeah.
And there were a lot of people, like, kind of felt like, well, what was the whole point of? Well, ultimately, they wanted to bring in, a younger audience, and I completely understand that. And all the more power, like, to new talent, like, getting their big break. That's totally fine. But the thing that he poignantly said is that cartoon characters are their voices, and you can't just easily replace that because people know those characters and they know those voices. Like, oh, Buttercup sure sounds different.
Yeah, right, yeah.
And to be fair, I don't know if this is true or not, but I think Rocket Power had the same thing. I think both Sam and Twister, I'm not sure if the actors went through puberty at one point in their life, or they were recast at one point, but there was one point when I was watching some of their shows earlier on, and I'm like, wow, these characters sure sound different.
Yeah. Oh, it's true. I mean, and shows going on for a long time too can have that problem. Like, I mean, Adventure Time when it started, you know what I mean? And like you hear him now, and you're like, whoa, but he grew up,
That's right. Yeah. Actually, now if we can just talk about it for a second.
Yeah, go for it.
I think Jeremy Shada, who voices Finn from Adventure Time, I think.
It was his older brother,
It was his older brother originally, but then his older brother went through puberty, I think, and then he was just like, oh yeah, I can't do a young kid voice anymore, so
right.
The torch was passed to Jeremy, And and speaking of, they had a beautiful sending on sending off for Comic-Con this year.
Oh wow!
Rebecca Sugar, if you guys have the opportunity to, and if you have a soft spot like me, she does a beautiful send off song,
really?
where it's instead of Adventure Time, it's Time Adventure. And it's just her and her ukulele, and John DiMaggio, who voices Jake the dog.
Right.
You can just see him slowly breaking down and and just quietly crying as she sings.
Oh my gosh.
It's so touching and it's so beautiful to see.
Amazing.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And that's the power that some of these shows have on us. Because we love them and captivate them so much. And why, as an actor, I feel like it's such a privilege when you find you're able to voice a character that people can not only identify with, but they just absolutely love and adore. And I feel like that's kind of the dream, when any actor's dream, is to create something that's just so significant, and it means something to others. Right. Because that's what kind of cartoons were for me. Because I'll be completely honest, I was a stupid kid.
Hey, me too, brother.
Absolutely. And even if I didn't get the message the whole time, they taught you something.
Right.
And sometimes they would be a little disturbing because it was the 90s and it was a little more edgy than today's PG versions of cartoons. They definitely made really really bold choices sometimes.
Right.
And sometimes it was either hit or miss, and sometimes like the parents kind of like, oh my god, like, you know, what
turn
is
that off.
Ren and Stimpy, what is this like, you know, garbage that you're watching? Incidentally enough, it was actually how I learned my first swear word. Actually, was watching South Park, and because not even realizing what it was. I remember my mom walking in to me watching South Park. She's like, "Oh, what sweet little cartoons!" Like, "What are you watching, sweetie?" And then of course, like, you know, not like 5 seconons go by, and then Cartman, like, you know, drops like, you know, like stupid you and stuff like that. She's like, "What did he say?"
Oh, that's funny, man.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I mean, that brings it around too, like the voice being the character. So now that you've had opportunities to do a lot of projects, and I'll just name drop a few here. I mean,
Sure.
we've got, if I'm saying them all right, Smoot.
Oh gosh,
No
yes,
pun
Smoot.
Nintendo. I want to go into all these, but Eames and Berry, The Journey Down,
Oh, yes.
Pale Spectrum, even like ones at school, Matador, Motorway. I love the voice
my
you did on that
gosh,
one. You've done various Lego projects, which I want to get into that.
I have,
We
yeah.
definitely need to get in Bo Mango and Ancestors Legacy, but let's go
course.
back to some of those early ones. Like, what were some of your early jobs, like doing voice acting? Like, whether or not you were paid, you know, but you just voice acting someone else's thing.
Absolutely. Well, incidentally enough, YouTube has been an amazing platform to allow me to get work and allow me to like kind of get my skills and talents, like, you know, like out to everyone to see. When YouTube was kind of still in its infancy, like people were still kind of trying to catch on to the concept of like, you know, like what is YouTube? For me personally, at the time when I was going through high school and YouTube was becoming more and more popular, people were essentially like using it as a creative outlet to make something like, you know, that you wouldn't see on television. And I just thought it was just something that, you know, you can just upload your America's Funniest Home Videos, because like
Right,
that's
yeah.
what I would watch, like the sports bloopers and like, you know, people just doing really stupid
Right.
things on the like and just injuring themselves for
Right.
for comedy's sake. So but yeah, kind of harking back to impressions, like, you know, whenever I would hang out with my friends, because they knew that I did impressions, and they're like, dude, you should put your impressions on YouTube. I'm going like, shut up, get out of here. Because like at that time there were already a lot of people that did impressions on YouTube. Just to name a few, Brizzy Voices, Brock Baker. Let's see, there's like so many other, like, you know, impressionists out there, like, you know, who do incredible work. At the time, I didn't want to become another statistic. But
Right.
like after the upteenth time of someone saying like, dude, put your impressions on YouTube, I'm like fine, if it'll shut you up, leave me alone. So I put it up there, and I just kind of like just would do impressions of, like, you know, characters that I grew up watching. I did the first thing, not really thinking of any of it, put it up on my channel, and then just forgot about it. Checked back on it after a few months, and I realized it had actually gotten some views. Like it was like,
nice.
it broke like 12,000 views.
Oh, wow.
And I'm going like, oh my gosh, wow. That's kind of when I got bit by the YouTube bug. And so from
And for
there...
curiosity, what year was that?
Oh my gosh, don't do that to me. I have to say it was maybe 2010, I want to say. I want to say 2010.
YouTube is big at this point.
It is
Very
pretty
big. Go
pretty
ahead.
big at this point, yeah. And so after that, like the most comments I would get would be like, I really dig your Invader Zim impression and stuff like that. And so like I would kind of like do highlights of like Invader Zim, Batman the Animated Series, like just to name a few. And I remember getting a message, like, you know, on my YouTube channel saying like, hey, would you be interested in voicing Zim for my show? And I'm going
Oh,
like,
wow.
yeah,
Like,
sure. And this was like
The Invader?
in the Invader, yeah. And so I did this thing, and and of course it was just one of those like very humble beginnings, like, you know, YouTube channels.
Right.
I don't even know if it's still a thing, because I could not remember like the channel to save my life. But
Yeah.
I did that one, and then it was actually Emily Stratterfield, who I love and adore. She's the same artist who created Smoot. Reached out to me because she was a part of this Facebook group called Soapy Waffles, where basically they were redoing and finishing the unfinished episodes of Invader Zim, completely fan done. And they said, hey, would you be interested in voicing Zim for these aired episodes of Invader Zim? Well, I'm like, oh my gosh, what an honor.
Yeah, that's amazing.
And so she basically recorded this promotional, and she presented it at InvaderCon, which is basically
Wow.
a con
Right.
solely dedicated to Jonah
Invader
Vasquez's
Zim,
work.
yeah.
Exactly. And I didn't even know it was a thing. And
Wow.
and it was met with pretty, you know, like oh wow, it does sound like Zim. And then like that's the biggest compliment that any like beginning voice actor can get when they're just doing impressions, like, you know, can receive, which is wonderful.
That's amazing.
So through that, I did more videos. I put out a Batman the Animated Series, like, you know, impressions video. And then I started getting more and more requests from people, like, you know, who just were starting on YouTube or already had like followings on YouTube, and they just wanted to, like, you know, delve more and more into their craft.
Right.
And that's kind of where we can get into brick animations. People who use Legos to animate like their passion projects, which is wonderful. I was approached by his name. He goes by Forest Fire 101 on YouTube, Forrest Whaley. And he reached out to me after I had done some Lord of the Rings impressions videos.
Nice.
And this is right at the same time where The Hobbit was at its peak in popularity.
Oh, here we go.
So he was commissioned by Warner Brothers to basically do a Hobbit-themed
Brick films,
Brick films, yeah. He's like, dude, can you, voice Bilbo in this project?
Wow.
And that was my first paid gig. And it's still one of like my favorite videos, that I've voiced, to date.
Wow.
And then after that, he commissioned me again to play Balin, one of the dwarves, and then and also continuing as Bilbo. I voiced Commissioner Gordon for him. I've voiced a few others, that I'm forgetting.
Was that also Guardians of the Galaxy? Was that in there?
That was a different artist, actually.
Oh, okay.
I forget his... Oh, that was Atlas. That's right. Atlas Animations with a Z.
Okay.
And he's a very talented, individual himself. Shout out to Atlas. You're amazing. I love you. And I voiced the Flash in his project. That's right. I voiced Two-Face as well. And that was a lot of fun. And just kind of through that, I started kind of building my network slowly but surely until I was kind of a freelance voice actor. And I invested in a relatively expensive microphone at that point. I set up an environment for myself to up the quality of my audio and so on and so forth. And I got to be a part of some really, really cool project. And I just consider myself very, very blessed in that regard.
That's awesome, man.
So yeah.
Just kind of along those lines. So when you're acting for characters that have had actors not only voicing them but also doing live action performances of them before, is that intimidating, or was that I just am so jazzed about doing voice acting,
There is a degree of hesitancy and a bit of anxiety, when you're asked to voice a character that fathomably better actor than you has already voiced it. So it's more of an homage, to this character, and you want to basically hold up the integrity of this character that you're basically trying to emulate. There is a bit of intimidation behind that, but at the same time your energy tends to outweigh any other voices in your head because you're just happy that you're able to do your thing. And that's happened to me a few times, especially when voicing either DC or Marvel characters or whatever character that I can do a decent impression at. And paving the way, from just being what I would consider just kind of an amateur impressionist to being what I would consider a full-fledged voice actor now is a really wonderful journey.
No, that's a great transition to the Amazon project that you brought up with me before the podcast.
Well, it's nothing really too much to write home about. It's still background work. So kind of to make ends meet, every actor kind of goes through the ringer of doing background work. But at the same time, what every actor dreams of being involved in is being a SAG actor. Mm-hmm. And so I'm an actor registered through Central Casting, and basically what they do is that they basically put out casting calls of what they're looking for physically. Okay, we're looking for someone who is either Caucasian or or Hispanic or African American, and they basically give specifics upscale, high end individual, or we're looking for someone who looks homeless, or we're looking for someone who looks more on the military side of things. Now, I've done a few gigs, in that regard as well, and it's always been a mixed bag because a competent crew will send you back to holding so you can basically get your second win back.
Right.
But an incompetent crew will basically keep you on set, still standing, still doing your thing, even though they're still setting up the next shot, and basically just draining you of, your energy, exactly. So, there's one casting call in particular that I kind of gravitated towards because they were looking for soccer players.
Oh, nice.
And I'm like, oh my gosh, I haven't played soccer in a good long while, but I still remember the fundamentals of it. They said, just list your experience, and then if you're available. But that's right, they were looking for Hispanic and ethnic-looking individuals, which I fit the bill for. So I got the part, and I drove down to Simi Valley to this ranch, and we basically were working on a show called Too Old to Die Young. There you go. It's an Amazon Prime original. Now, even though they asked for people to play soccer and have people good at soccer, ultimately what they were looking for is just people who are willing to just play around in the middle of the summer sun, in this ranch, including incompetent film crews. It's primarily the director's fault or like the first AD's fault. Like whenever they realize that, oh, we should probably send background back to holding because they've been standing for God knows how long
in the sun,
exposed to the elements, right? So I had a bit of a hard time, like, just in that regard. But it was through this show that I got my 3 union vouchers. So I'm SAG eligible now, and I feel like that, whether you believe in God or not, like finally kind of have like, the go ahead of pursue this. Like, you're good at it. Even though it's just still background work, but
that's awesome.
I will share one small story. Like as we were playing soccer, we were there for the first 3 days, and they called us back. There was one actor among us that had to do a specific blocking with a primary talent, and he did his blocking like over and over again. But because we were running around so much, and he's kind of older than us, your body just doesn't keep up. Exactly. Because we were running around, with little to no protection. We were just completely exhausted. So the day after, when we were supposed to come back, he basically called in going like, I can't come back. And so basically like continuity was completely ruined. Because this one person couldn't come back because we had to continue that same shot.
Right.
And that person was no longer there to do the blocking with the primary actor. So we're like, we have to start from the very beginning. And I felt so terrible for my second AD, who was so good to us. He's like, we're screwed. But they basically looked to me because the actor who bowed out basically had a shaved head. And like just very little facial hair, and I was rocking a fuller beard than I have now.
Right.
The second AD looked at me and go like, "Hey, would you be willing to shave your head?" and I'm going like, "Okay, sure, why not?" Yeah. And so, long story short, I basically took that guy's place. And so now, I don't know if when it'll come out. Speed Racer. Yeah. So yeah, despite its ups and downs and despite its setbacks, I consider myself very blessed, to be a part of this project because when I'm ready, I'll be a SAG actor.
That's awesome.
I'm very, very happy in that regard.
So for those who don't know what that is,
right? Yes.
Could you go into that and
Absolutely.
Even what those vouchers do and what they're for, and how you get them?
Every individual who wants to be an actor, they usually have to kind of go through the ringer of just doing background work. And now what that is that any movie that you see where there's large masses of crowds or any show where you see where there just see people in the background, if it's a press conference, you're filled with techies, those aren't actual techies who actually are competent at writing code. They're just actors in nerdy clothing. Movie magic has been destroyed for everyone now. You're like, oh, what really?
Wait, those weren't actually dinosaurs?
Exactly, yeah. What SAG means is that it's the Screen Actors Guild, essentially. When you have enough momentum, in SAG as an actor, you get health benefits, you get higher wages, you get certain perks if you're doing these background jobs that you wouldn't have as opposed to being a no-name actor. And so there's non-union vouchers and union vouchers. Now, depending on what gig you book, most if you're a non-union actor, you are given a non-union voucher. But there are some exceptions where if you're booking a non-union job, you can sometimes be given a union voucher. And if you get 3 of them, you're eligible to be part of the union, to be part of SAG. And that's every actor's dream because that gets you more attention, for agencies, that gets you more attention, for other jobs and casting calls. And now that I'm kind of in a spot where the ball is slowly rolling, getting bigger and bigger, and as it's rolling down the snowy mountain, I finally feel I'm finally making progress, and so I'm rejoicing in that regard.
That's exciting, man. That's super cool. What about recording equipment? For people who want to get into this, what do you use? Techniques of acting, any of that kind of stuff?
Absolutely. Any person that wants to be an actor, I highly recommend just getting your feet wet. Starting with local theater and community projects. If you go to school, get involved with the drama department. Get involved with people who want to be actors. If you're already past school, the internet is literally a wealth of information. If you just do Google searches on acting tips, online courses, the list is endless. But if you kind of want to do what I'm doing currently, I would highly recommend looking up Chuck Huber and Andy Field. They have online Zoom classes that delve deeper into the realms of voice acting and that delve deeper into the business side, which I recommend every actor get into because there's a finite amount of information that you should know as an actor if and when you book a gig that goes into signing contracts, how to get more attention, how to build your clientele, how to build yourself as an actor and represent yourself as an actor, like from the ground up. And there are several, avenues that you can do. Like LinkedIn is one. There are open casting calls, like, that you can get your feet wet. But in terms of honing your craft, it takes more than just doing silly voices, like to kind of like, that can be a gateway and like kind of like be like, oh wow, you have a lot of versatility, that's great.
Right.
But it takes a whole different ball game to take either Kermit the Frog or Mickey Mouse or whatever impression you're really good at and really kind of sell that as the character. Try taking Mickey or try taking like, Kermit and like really kind of dirtying their voices and really kind of like creating original voice from that,
Right.
impression. Because that's kind of like what a lot of voice actors do is like, they or actors just in general do. They have impressions that they're amazing at, but they don't know how to to bring it home. They don't know how to
Right.
sell it as if oh, that's Kermit the Frog having a mental breakdown, or like that's Mickey Mouse on the verge of suicide or something. Not to go in the realms of dark here, but
Oh man.
now I know you hear this constant you're just in the workforce, but you need to get some more experience. But if you honestly feel like you're ready, there are dozens of avenues and domain sites that have open casting calls. There's Facebook groups that you can look at, just look up either voice acting clubs. There's also a wealth of information there. And,
Right.
and what's great about the voiceover community that I have learned is that we all want to help each other. It's so supportive and so rewarding when you realize oh, my friend you just booked a gig, that's so great.
Yeah.
So you really kind of invigorate each other and you support one another, which is wonderful. And also what I highly recommend is not just voice acting and just sticking to what you want to pursue. Well, I have the good fortune of kind of sticking my fingers in a lot of pies and learning certain departments just with film production and just with audio production and stuff like that. Get your hands dirty and just casting for your own content. Create some of your own, start a YouTube channel, or start a talk show, do what Ben's doing. Start a podcast. This is great. I love this stuff. And invite other actors to interact with you and pick their brain on it. There's one thing before I switch into the technical side of things.
Go for it.
My cinematography teacher once said to me, the great thing about the industry is that you can ask anyone who's made it into the industry and not a single answer will be the same.
Yeah.
That's kind of the beauty and also kind of the tragedy of the industry is that there is no surefire way on how to break in, whether you're an actor or an editor or a director or a writer. You just kind of have to hone your craft, make connections. There's a lot of elbow rubbing and a lot of just breaking out of your shell, especially if you're an introvert. It's very difficult because you have to put yourself and sell yourself as an individual. This is what I'm good at.
Right.
The great thing is that not a single story will be the same. Now for the technical side of things, for those who are still interested in becoming voice actors, invest in a USB microphone. I recommend either a Blue Snowball, that's kind of every entry voice actor's microphone is a Snowball. The one that I was rocking for the longest time that I was getting a lot of paid work for was Blue Spark Digital. I was just doing that and recording in my closet for goodness knows how long.
Wow.
You need and that's kind of the unspoken secret. Of course, you want basically zero sound.
Right.
So
Not where we are right now.
Exactly, yeah. So yeah, a USB microphone, but you want to eventually graduate to a condenser microphone or an XLR. That's kind of more in the realms of a lot heftier pricing, in the realms of either an $800 or $1,000 microphone. If this is still something that you want to do, because I can guarantee you now there are going to come lows and highs in this career choice if this is what you want to do, where it's going to be you're going to question yourself is this worth it still?
Right.
And if you, in your heart of hearts, if it's still what you want to do, pursue it. And I tell this to a lot of my friends who aren't even actors but are hesitant, hey, do I still have time to do this?
Right.
Don't listen to fear, and don't let your age or time dictate your choices. Just kind of as an example, when I was still going through the ringer of film production here, there was a gentleman among us who was in his 40s. He was married, he had kids, and he was going through the realms of academia, and he was just getting his bachelor's degree. And he was even kind of beating himself up. He was I feel like I missed my window, and even now I feel like I don't even belong here, and that's just not true. Right. And but he learned through the hard semesters that there is still time, and because of that he was for any sort of college you have a final project for your
Right.
senior year. He pitched a student film. and he got chosen.
Wow.
This 40-year-old
awesome.
guy, yeah, like, and
That's
what
so
an
cool.
inspiration that is. Yeah, and it
Yeah.
was an amazing student film. It was amazing.
Wow.
And like real quick shout out to Sean Bean there, like who did the short film Jack and Me. If you have the opportunity, like to go look for it, watch it. It's beautiful.
Is that on YouTube?
It's on Vimeo actually.
Okay, yeah.
So if you have the opportunity,
Check it out.
check it out. If you feel like you have the talents, like to pursue a career in the industry, regardless of what it is, not just voice acting, just pursue. Like, never stop growing, never stop learning. Don't get in the position where like you think that your work is satisfactory when you're just kind of starting. Like the danger behind basically thinking that you can do better than other people, especially when you have zero experience, is that you're going in this with a realm of arrogance, and then you end up just shooting yourself in the foot. And I've seen countless artists do that to themselves, where basically they have talent, raw talent, but it's not refined. It's not honed. And then when they get into a position where goodness knows they get into a position where they actually have some leeway in a project, it just all falls apart.
Right.
And because they're not ready. And I'm not trying to dishearten anyone who basically is having an anxiety attack. I'm like, oh, am I good enough?
Yeah.
Exactly. But give yourself permission to fail, of course, because you're going to meet failure, no matter where your goals are.
Right.
But fail forward, and I'm not the first person to say that. The countless people have said that, and we just pursue, learn, grow, do.
That's awesome, man.
Yeah.
And it's cool to see that, in the time I've known you, totally doing that, and
Thanks. Thank you.
not
Thank you.
and not on the failing side. I'm talking about how passionate you've been about it, and you were
Yes.
talking about just now, constantly going for it and knowing how to sell yourself,
Yeah.
And that ties it in my cheesy tie round all the way back to Bomango, because
Yes.
that
Oh, my
instantly sold me at that pitch, and I'm sitting right next to you, so. We got to talk about that project.
Of course, absolutely. As I said before at the beginning of this podcast, I started reading the Bomango comics back in 2014. Now, my friend Rob, who I didn't know at the time, he basically kind of given me his permission to basically take Bomango as a concept and pitch it to film producers. When I first started reading the comics, just me by myself, whenever I read content or comics in general, I have to read it out loud.
Yeah.
It's just the actor in me. And I have to interpret how the voices would sound in my head. And that's just kind of how it got started, because I just loved reading these comics and just bringing these characters to life. And so for those of you who don't know, I would highly recommend, Bomango has its own domain site now, which is wonderful.
Oh, that's great.
And if you just look up Bomango Comics or Van Heist or Rob Tempest, you'll be able to find the domain site right away. Essentially, what the show is about, it's kind of a coming-of-age story revolving around a young teen by the name of Andy Fisher. He comes from the middle of nowhere, Wisconsin, kind of like the Iron Giant meets Fooly Cooley is the best way I can describe it.
Oh, that's a great way of putting it. Now that I've seen
absolutely,
some,
yeah. Because Andy meets this woman by the name of Go-Go, this very kind of foreign, hulking brute woman who is very pugnacious and irritable and very prone to anger and just breaking things.
Yeah.
And she could be easily equated to basically kind of the Hulk from from Marvel, in terms of if she gets angry enough. But what's great about the dynamic between these two characters is the fact that they kind of complete each other in the way where Go-Go is, she has a lot of life experience and she's kind of has a chip on her shoulder from what life has put her through.
Right.
But she's very immature. She's very, what's the word?
Impulsive?
Impulsive, thank you very much. And she's just kind of a man-child.
Yeah.
and here you have kind of on the opposite spectrum where you have Andy, who's very young. Although he's very young, he's very mature for his age. He's intelligent. He's very understanding. He's kind of soft-spoken, a bit sarcastic at points, as young boys do. So, but they kind of counterbalance each other, where she kind of gives him her perspective of life is not fair. Life, is very harsh. Very if you either learn to fight for yourself or you'll be devoured. And then on the opposite spectrum of Andy's perspective is that life is a lot more than that. There are moments where life is beautiful, and life you can be a part of a wonderful family. You can be a part of a society where they look out for one another. It's not just this eat or be eaten mentality.
Right.
With Go-Go, she's a character who comes from a completely different world. Ultimately, she's a demigod. But what's cool about her is that like she turns into kind of like this kaiju monster. Because I kind of had brought these characters to life in my head, I'm like, I have to do something with this. Like, I couldn't sit still. So I reached out to Rob and I said, hey, is it cool if I put voices to these characters? And he had given me his blessing. And so the first one that I had done, I was like, okay, I have Andy. I need to go Anna Didi. And incidentally enough, another animator friend of mine was doing, comic dubs as well. I think it was like Barbarian Scotty was, I believe, like the name of the comic that he was dubbing. And essentially, it revolved around a Scandinavian barbarian woman, kind of like from the realms of D&D, and this owl sidekick that she had, where she would just get in like the worst hijinks you can imagine. Yeah. And she kind of had like this slight European accent, broken English kind of a vibe that I was going for. I'm like, oh my god, that's Go-Go! Yeah. And enter Sandra Espinosa, aka Dusty Old Roses, who I love and adore. I reached out to her and I said, hey, would you be interested in collaborating and bringing these characters to life? Because I asked her to voice Dee Dee as well. And she hit it out of the park. Like, she defied all expectations. And so, and this is why I encourage people, like, to kind of, like, get their feet wet with, like, all realms of content. Because what I did, like, not only as an actor, but I also kind of fell in love with editing. And through one video, like, spawned another, and then another, and then another. And through that time span, I started upping the quality, challenging myself, learning more and more about like this my editing software and how I could bring these still images to like into the realms of an animated adaptation. And now with my most recent release, I'm very proud of it. I don't mean to toot my own horn. I'm just trying to
it's great.
Let's just say what I feel.
Which episode is that, by the way?
This is Halcyon Girl Part 4, and this is where I incorporated like a lot of visual effects, like lightning, glow effects, and it's Go-Go telling Andy about like her story as a child. It's adorable but heartbreaking at the same time. And I'll try and keep things relatively spoilery here, but through our friendship, me and Rob, and through because he's giving me a sneak peek at what is basically in store for this series. And the more he's kind of giving me sneak peeks, the more I'm like, this has to be a cartoon. Yeah. Please, for the love of goodness, this has to be a cartoon. Right. And who knows? But Mango very well could evolve into something more than its current platform. It really is kind of up to Rob. I'm just so grateful that I've been along for the ride and been able to adapt what I've been able to adapt. But I've had plenty of daydream, just wondering, if this was a show. Oh my goodness. Because I get comments like that all the time on the videos, going why is this not a show on Netflix, or why is this not a show on Adult Swim? Where I'm I wonder that myself sometimes. Yeah. I'm right there with you, buddy.
Oh, I feel you. I mean, being someone who's watched the videos and
thank you.
I love them, man. They're great. Thank you. I think what we need to leave it with now is where can people go to find your work?
Absolutely. You can check out my work at YouTube/DeadTom, and that's my YouTube channel. And also, if you want to,
like the Muppets Treasure Island,
like the Muppets Treasure Island, yeah.
I love that.
Funny story, yeah. Because when I first started my YouTube channel, granted this was back in high school, when I was looking for a username, the already popular and nostalgic, names were already taken, anything associated with Ninja, with
Triple X,
yeah, stuff like that.
007, all
exactly,
that stuff,
yeah. So, but for some reason or other, Muppet Treasure Island popped into my head, and I'm going oh, there's Real Tom, there's Dead Tom. And so Dead Tom kind of stuck with me, and I'm going okay, cool. But even though my name is Jordan, I'm everyone kind of refers to me as Tom for those who know me in the YouTube realms. So it's just kind of been this kind of inside joke. But yeah, for those who are interested in seeing more Mango videos, you can check out my my YouTube channel at Dead Tom. And also, if you want to follow me on Twitter, DeadTom22 at twitter.com, I think. Hopefully I'm saying that right. I'm just saying URL.
I'll put the link. Yeah.
I just turned into a Rick and Morty episode, www.rickandmorty, just making up stuff on the fly.
Oh my gosh. But Jordan, thank you so much for meeting with me.
Thanks for having me, Ben.
Always good to talk with you. Thanks for your time today.
And likewise, thank you for having me. And it's always a joy to meet fellow artists and friends who are just so enthusiastic about their craft and our career choices. That's amazing.
And that concludes your conversation with Jordan Haro.
Yeah. And it was a good conversation, I thought. I hope you guys all enjoyed it. Starting with doing fan work, essentially, moving into professional work. One thing that stands out to me in my conversation is how much Jordan knows about his craft. And he researches it, he thinks about it. as you guys probably noticed, he'll pull up people and quote things from them that he hasn't heard for years, and he'll know their name and when it happened. And I was talking to him after the podcast, and he brought up even more things. So Jordan is someone that I respect because he really knows his craft, and he really works at his craft to perfect it.
It's something that I feel convicted about, that I'm not putting the time into. I'd like to be more well-versed in my craft, to know those things so that I have a bigger pool to draw from when I'm doing my art.
Yeah, and I hope people do check out his work. On YouTube is where I follow him mostly. He's also on Twitter. On YouTube, he's Dead Tom, so like Muppet Treasure Island. And then Twitter, he's Dead Tom 22. So yeah, check out his work, guys. Voice acting, and then I'll put a link on my website as well as on YouTube for the Bomango comics that he does the voice of Andy on, so you guys can check it out.
Cool. Well, thank you guys for joining us for another episode. Until next time, keep on arting along.
I don't know. We need a cool sign off. That's what this really proves.